Why can the mind know so much, yet still fail to see the truth? In the modern world, intelligence is measured by how much information one can process: data, logic, analysis, argumentation. Yet, despite this explosion of knowledge, confusion and moral uncertainty persist. We live in an age where facts are abundant, but wisdom feels rare. Imam Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali, one of the most influential philosophers in Islamic history, confronted this paradox nearly 1,000 years ago. He argued that the human mind, though powerful, is not the final organ of truth. The intellect can describe reality, but cannot see it in its essence. It is a tool, precise but partial, for Al-Ghazali. Mystical truth, the kind that transforms one's entire being, cannot be grasped by reason alone. It must be seen by what he calls the heart, a faculty of direct perception deeper than thought. The guiding question, then, is, what does it mean to see with the heart? And how does this transform mere knowledge into living wisdom? We live in what psychologists call the information age, but it might just as accurately be called the age of blindness through information. Knowledge is everywhere, yet understanding seems increasingly absent. Cognitive science describes a phenomenon known as the illusion of explanatory depth. People often believe they understand complex systems, economics, consciousness, morality, but when asked to explain them coherently, their understanding collapses. The intellect, in other words, can simulate comprehension without achieving it. Neuroscience reveals why this happens. The brain's reasoning centers function best when supported by emotional and moral intuition processed in deeper networks. When intellect is isolated from emotion and ethics, knowledge becomes fragmented, sharp but shallow. In Al-Ghazali's language, the modern mind has become informed but unintegrated. It collects, categorizes, and calculates, but cannot synthesize. The heart, which he saw as the center of inner perception, has been neglected. If the mind is filled with information, but the heart is blind, what kind of truth are we really living by? To understand his insight, we must look briefly at the crisis that shaped him. Al-Ghazali was a towering intellect of the 11th century theologian, jurist, philosopher, and spiritual reformer. Yet, at the height of his career, he faced what we might call a psychological collapse. He had mastered every field of knowledge, logic, metaphysics, law, theology, but was haunted by doubt. None of it gave him certainty. He began to suspect that reason, no matter how refined, could never reach truth's essence. In his autobiographical work, Deliverance from Error, he recounts how this doubt led him to withdraw from public life in search of a more direct form of knowing. What he discovered transformed his understanding of knowledge itself. Truth, he concluded, cannot merely be proven. It must be tasted, experiential realization. He distinguished between discursive knowledge acquired by study and mifa, direct knowing, which emerges through a purified heart. Al-Ghazali thus became not only a philosopher, but a psychologist of consciousness. He treated knowing as a living process, one that depends not on logic alone, but on the total refinement of the self. Rational knowledge, Al-Ghazali argued, produces representation but not realization. The intellect operates through duality, separating knower and known, subject and object. It can describe what something is, but it cannot become what it knows. He wrote, "The eye of reason sees the form. The eye of the heart sees the essence." Intellect can point toward truth, but cannot embody it. Cognitive science today echoes this idea. Studies in perception reveal that the brain does not perceive reality directly but constructs models filtered through bias, memory, and expectation. We never experience reality as it is, only as the mind interprets it. Rational thought clarifies, but does not connect. It helps us describe the map, but not walk the terrain. Consider the difference between knowing the chemical composition of water and drinking it when you are thirsty. The first is informational. The second is existential. Knowledge becomes real only when it transforms experience to see truth. The self must move beyond conceptual knowing into direct awareness, where subject and object, thinker and thought are no longer divided. In Al-Ghazali's framework, the qalb, or heart, is not a metaphor for emotion. It is a subtle center of consciousness, capable of perceiving truth directly when purified from egoic distortions. When the heart is free from anger, greed, and pride, it becomes, in his words, a polished mirror reflecting the reality of things. The heart reflects what is, without distortion. When not clouded by self-reference, modern psychology offers intriguing parallels. Daniel Goleman's theory of emotional intelligence emphasizes that cognition depends on effective regulation. Clarity of mind emerges from emotional balance. Similarly, research on heart-brain coherence shows that synchronized heart rhythms correspond to enhanced cognitive performance and emotional stability. Neurocardiology demonstrates that the heart communicates bidirectionally with the brain, influencing perception, decision, and intuition. For Al-Ghazali, this seeing by the heart represents direct intuition, a state where thought and being align. Moments of deep moral clarity or creative inspiration, often described as knowing from within, arise from this unity. The heart knows not by analysis but by presence. It perceives reality without fragmentation and experience. Reason can never fully replicate. If the heart possesses this faculty of perception, why is it often blind? Al-Ghazali's answer is simple but demanding, because it is covered by the dust of the ego. In the revival of the religious sciences, he describes the process of cleansing the heart through sincerity, detachment, remembrance, and self-accounting. These are not merely devotional acts. They are psychological disciplines aimed at restoring clarity of perception. From a cognitive standpoint, this process parallels the removal of biases that distort judgment. Confirmation bias, ego defense mechanisms, and emotional reactivity all narrow our capacity to see truth objectively. Modern neuroscience calls this metacognition, the ability to observe one's thoughts without being consumed by them. Studies show that this capacity activates the brain regions responsible for self-regulation and moral reasoning. Al-Ghazali anticipated this insight centuries earlier. For him, purification is not moral decoration but epistemological necessity. Only a transparent heart perceives clearly. When the mirror of the heart is cleansed of dust, he wrote, it reflects the light of truth. The transformation of knowledge is inseparable from the transformation of being at the peak of his intellectual and spiritual synthesis. Al-Ghazali defined true knowing as illumination. Knowledge is not something we generate, it is something revealed when the conditions of perception are purified. This illumination is not emotional ecstasy. It is the self-evident presence of reality within consciousness. Just as the eye cannot see without light, the intellect cannot know without the light of awareness itself. In philosophical terms, this anticipates phenomenology, the idea that consciousness is the ground of all appearance. Awareness is not an effect of thought. It is the medium through which all thought occurs. When Al-Ghazali speaks of illumination, he describes a state where the distinction between knower and known dissolves. This is mifa, direct recognition of truth by unity with it. Mystical knowledge is not irrational. It is transrational, a form of understanding that includes reason but transcends its limits. Why must truth be seen by the heart rather than understood by the intellect? Because the intellect, by its nature, divides. It observes the world as a series of relations between knower and known, cause and effect, theory and object. The heart unites. It does not analyze reality from outside, but participates in it from within. Rational thought produces knowledge about truth. The heart produces knowledge as truth. This is not a rejection of reason, but a reordering of its role. The intellect describes reality. The heart encounters it. Modern psychology speaks of embodied cognition, knowledge inseparable from lived experience. Similarly, Al-Ghazali sees real understanding as transformation. Knowledge that does not change the knower is incomplete. When knowing becomes being, insight turns into spontaneous right action. There is no moral effort because clarity naturally aligns with truth. Seeing with the heart dissolves the final illusion, the illusion of separation itself. How can this ancient insight be applied in modern life? Al-Ghazali's method can be translated into practical disciplines that align with contemporary psychology and neuroscience. Inner observation, watching one's thoughts and reactions without judgment. Emotional regulation, recognizing emotions as transient signals, not ultimate truths. Ethical alignment, practicing sincerity and integrity as internal. Feedback for truth, silence and reflection. Periods of quiet attention, allowing insight to arise. Naturally, these are not mystical rituals but systematic ways of refining consciousness. Research confirms their effectiveness in improving moral reasoning, reducing stress, and enhancing emotional stability, what Al-Ghazali called the illumination of the heart. Modern science might call integration of cognitive and emotional systems. Both describe the same state, a harmony of awareness in which truth becomes self-evident. The journey Al-Ghazali describes is the movement from knowing to seeing. Knowledge alone does not guarantee vision. The intellect constructs models of reality. The heart encounters reality itself. True wisdom begins when understanding becomes being. Modern psychology calls this integration. Spirituality calls it illumination. In both, the transformation lies not in accumulating information, but in refining perception. When the heart sees, knowledge becomes light, self-evident, effortless, and complete. Truth ceases to be an abstract idea because it becomes the condition of your awareness. The highest intelligence is not how much we know, but how purely we can see.